Nothing will crush a real estate investor's spirit like landlord stress. The difference between being successful and miserable in managing properties is education. Welcome to Landlord University, where landlords learn. Landlord University is recorded from inside the RentPrep office, where Stephen White and Jeff Pearson share the lessons learned from working with some of the most successful landlords.
Welcome to Landlord University Night School. I'm Jeff Pearson, and this is my co-host,
Stephen White.
Hello, Stephen. How are you doing this evening?
Pretty good, Jeff. We're covering a topic today that I think every landlord has to deal with at some point, whether, it's a water emergency or any type of emergency that can happen inside of a rental home or any home. And I think it's going to come down to the same thing that, any good business does, and that's preparation. So we're going to be covering some tips on how to deal with a water emergency.
Okay. Now, you talk about preparation. There are a couple of different types of preparation. There's actually preparing your property, doing preventative maintenance and things like that. The other part of preparation is making sure you know what steps you're going to take when you get that phone call.
Yeah. And also making your tenants aware of what steps are going to be taken. A
Yes.
lot of landlords can, alleviate a huge stress by just being prepared in case of these situations. And what jumps into my mind is, you know, um, having somebody that they can call, because if a water line breaks, you as the landlord may not really be able to do anything, especially if it's an emergency situation. So, I prefer to give the tenant themselves information to the service people that I have, that are my contracted service people. So if I
Mm-hmm.
say, listen, if there's a plumbing problem, here's the plumber's number. And the plumber knows that when he gets the phone call at 2 a.m., the next day he's letting me know. And that avoids me getting that phone call at 2 a.m.
Yes.
So that level of preparedness, not only for me, the landlord, and what I'm preparing myself for, but also prepare the tenant. Let them know, here's what you should do in this situation, and here's who you should call.
In addition to that, they need to know what steps they should take. It depends on whether you're talking about a minor emergency or a major emergency. But again, training the tenant to know what steps to take. Sure, make the phone call, but then what do they need to do?
Yeah. The most obvious thing that jumps out into my mind is I had a situation one time where we had a water pipe break, and thankfully the tenant knew, because we had shown the tenant where the main valve was for the shutoff. Now, I've heard of other horror stories in the past where the tenant panics, doesn't know what to do, starts making phone calls, calls the landlord or whoever, and in the meantime, the water keeps leaking, or it's pouring out into the rental unit, and just causing more damage and more problems. Where if they knew where to go shut that off, that could eliminate a huge part of the problem right there, and probably reduce the amount of damage that's done too.
Yes. We've talked about doing an episode in the very near future about annual inspections. And I would think that would be a good thing to include in your annual inspection is make sure they understand how to turn the water and the gas off.
Absolutely. Turn the water off, turn the gas off, where the fuse box is. I mean, these are, all typical things that I think as homeowners, you take for granted that that's just things that you need to know. But as a landlord, you also have that responsibility to that person occupying that rental unit, that, listen, these are some things that, you need to know in case of an emergency, and where they
Yes.
are and how to deal with it. Some problems, like a problem that we may deal with here in New York, especially in Buffalo, New York, are pipes freezing.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that happens a lot, all the time, matter of fact. So, there's some things that you can do, to prevent pipes from freezing. There's different steps that you can take. There's different measures. There's things that the landlord can obviously do, like insulate some pipes, especially in the basement or things like that. But just something as simple as letting them know, listen, if you're going on a vacation, don't turn your heat off, in the wintertime. That happens a lot of times up here in New York. People go on a vacation for a week or whatever, and they think that they're saving some money by shutting the heat and things like that all the way down, or turning it off, and they come back to a frozen house because nothing's heating those pipes up and keeping them from freezing. So, preventative maintenance, I think, covers a lot of things. And I think as a landlord, you have to sit down and cover kind of a worst case scenario, what if situation. Um, Sort of look at everything and say, okay, I'm going to try and cover and come up with as many situations as I possibly can. And here's some ways to prevent them. Here's some ways how to deal with them in the event that they happen, whether it's a blocked drain, a leaky fixture, a pipe that breaks, a frozen pipe, whatever it may be, because that person on the scene, that tenant that's actually in the unit, has the best ability to have an immediate effect on it and reduce the amount of damage that can occur.
There are a couple of things that I think about with a water emergency. One, certainly you want to get the plumbing taken care of. If there's a water leak, you want to get it fixed. But as soon as you get the water stopped and you get the repair taken care of, the next step is, what do you have to do to the other damage that was caused by that water? And in this day and age, there are companies out there that specialize in water damage. And talk about all of the service companies that we have in our Rolodex. I would be sure that I've established a relationship with one of these companies, at least have their phone number to be able to call them, so they can come out immediately and start checking on things and let you know what needs to be done. Because with water, you're dealing with a time-sensitive issue.
Yeah. And, something that just came up the other day, and it's something that we hear very, very often at RentPrep. Water damage has a long-term effect, especially when dealing with issues of mold. And one of the, I would say, unofficially, just something that we hear a lot of, doing a lot of verifications and things, one of the most common reasons that somebody breaks their lease is because of mold issues that occur after some sort of water damage, because the place is no longer inhabitable. They can't live there. And, it's totally preventable. And a lot of it has to do with, like you just mentioned, what you do after that problem is fixed. Okay, now the main problem is fixed. Now we need to address the damage that was done. And, whether it's, water damage to the walls or in the basement or whatever have you, you need to be looking for potential mold issues. And I think having a professional company, if you're not extremely handy yourself, having a professional company come in there and take a look at some of that stuff, so it prevents problems down the road. And you're not even giving that tenant an opportunity to say, I don't feel safe living here because I fear that there's mold now growing.
The other piece to that I was thinking of is insurance. And again, insurance is one of those things that you need to pay attention to before it comes up. So while you're thinking about water emergencies, look at your policy, reach out to your insurance agent and talk to them about what is and is not covered when it comes to a water emergency. And what would you be on the hook for if you had major water damage? And, mold is another one of those things.
Yeah. And on the flip side of that too, we've talked about it in the past. Not every state requires renters to carry renter's insurance, but if the tenant has a TV or something something that's their property that's in the unit and it gets damaged by water, your insurance is not going to cover it. So, making sure that tenant is also properly covered in these type of events, is a good preventative maintenance to take as well, making sure that they're set with the proper insurance and they're going to be covered. And they also understand, listen, my policy is not going to cover your 70-inch TV if your water, if something happens here. So, it's important that you're carrying your own insurance as well.
The biggest thing at the end of all of this is making sure that if there is a water leak or water damage, you need to make the property habitable for your tenants. So make sure that you're taking all of the steps to take care of that and get them back into a habitable property.
Definitely.
All right, Stephen, I think that wraps up another evening of Night School. I look forward to talking with you tomorrow evening.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for listening to Landlord University. And remember to visit rentprep.com/landlordu to see show notes and access free resources like forms and guides. And be sure to check out Jeff Pearson hosting his own hit podcast at thementorimpact.com.